Sure.
The most recent CBS News polling on gun policy showed more than half of Americans supported stricter gun laws. Back in April, 54% said laws covering gun sales should be more strict. 11% said they should be less strict, and 33% said they should be kept as they are. CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins me now. So, Anthony, have Americans' opinions on gun laws changed over the years as we've seen more of these mass shootings?
Well, oftentimes we do polls sometime in the wake of a mass shooting, and you'll see a lot of poll numbers come out. This is not a new one, obviously. We're talking about the larger context here. But when that happens, we do tend to see a spike in the number of people who say that they would favor stricter laws. And then as time goes on, those numbers tend to come down a little bit. So overall, on balance, you've seen, as you described, about half of folks who say that they would favor something stricter. However, the details are always important here, too, I would emphasize. You can talk about stricter gun laws, but what does that mean when you go deeper and you say, well, what about assault weapons in particular? Those numbers tend to find just slightly even higher amount of favor for something stricter on assault weapons. And you know, it's also, though, important to recognize those things have bounced around a lot as well as these things come in and out of the news. So it's not always a stable, straight line, Elaine.
So the trend really is that depending on what is happening, that really does sound like that affects Americans' views when it comes to gun control policy.
It does.
Now let's talk about political party beliefs here, because, you know, you think about the debate and, you know, I can guess oftentimes, okay, if you have the Republicans, as President Trump has made clear, he supports those, many of them Republicans, who hold that Second Amendment right to bear arms very dear and see any infringement on it, any measure of gun control as an infringement on that right. You have then the opposite end of the political spectrum here, where people, we saw, for instance, former Democratic Congresswoman Gabby Giffords with her husband Mark Kelly advocating for Congress to take up stricter gun control measures. But when it comes to Americans, how do they perceive this issue? Is it simply through the lens of Democrat and Republican? Increasingly so.
It wasn't always that way, but we did see slightly larger partisan splits over the last 10 or 15 years. One of the things that's notable, too, is that you also see different gender splits. We've seen a larger number of women, including some Republican women, at times in polls tend to move toward favoring stricter laws, and men more against. But on your first point, you're exactly right. This is a very personal issue for a lot of folks on both sides of this. And, you know, when you even look at gun owners in particular, many of them say the gun is not the issue here. It's the person, right? And that comes out in the polling. So then when you ask if gun control would, you know, people think would stop more violence, a lot of them say, if they're a gun owner, they say, well, you know, I take care of my gun. I'm a responsible gun owner. So it's the person. And it's about, you know, they answer, it's about mental health and it's about somebody's upbringing or somebody's exposure to violence. There's no single consensus on what the problem is. And so this is one of those issues where everybody's sort of looking for a solution, but nobody necessarily agrees on what the core of the problem is. For those folks who do see it first and foremost as a gun problem in particular, yeah, those numbers have held relatively steady over time.
All right, Anthony Salvanto, I know you'll continue to watch how Americans' views on this issue evolve.